Native American legends are possibly my favorite. Their stories feature nature's fury and power in ways that are often meant to scare the socks off of children. It's a great way to get your kids to respect nature, and that's what Native Americans are all about. Today, we're diving into this amazing indigenous folklore with stories from people who claim to have actually encountered some of the creatures and entities from this mythology. Enjoy these tales of skinwalkers, Wendigo, and other Native American legends. Now let's begin. This happened at the beginning of August this year. My grandmother set up her childhood home as a rent property down in New Boston, a bit over 3 hours away from Dallas. My father regularly checks the property during the day, about every other month or so. The last time he checked it, it appeared we had squatters on the property. The police were of no help either. You see, the police chief at one point tried to buy that property from my grandmother for much lower than the value of the property. And when my grandma said no, it caused some bad blood, telling him to screw off and try again when he wasn't being cheap. My grandmother believed they had a grudge against us. My father had some harassment issues with them for a while, but him being an ex-con doesn't help. So on this occasion, my grandmother asked me to go check the property. A new face, I guess. I mean, personally, I don't have any enemies. She gave me some gas and food money, as most of my time would be spent on the road getting there. $300 is what she gave me, as my Tahoe at the time ate gas like crazy. I left by 9 p.m. that night, letting my dad know that I was heading out. I had my Henry all-weather rifle in case I had any problems with words. I made it to New Boston by 12 a.m. I pulled up in the driveway in my 1999 Tahoe. I got out and surveyed the front and backyard, and nothing strange was afoot. So I used the spare key to get inside the house. I checked each and every room slowly. I had just finished my rounds of the entire house when a god-awful smell hit my nose like a ton of bricks. The smell of death and decay was in the air. I thought to myself, the house is clear, so what is that smell coming from? Before I could have even one more thought, I heard a blood-chilling scream, the sound of a woman in pure agony, and it was coming from right in the backyard. As goosebumps popped up on my skin, I jumped up and crept in a stalking position to the window. Ever so carefully, I parted one of the blinds, hoping not to announce my presence any further. To my horror, I saw this emaciated thing in the backyard. To be completely honest with you, it reminded me of one of those werewolves from Dragon Age Origins, but far, far skinnier. So skinny, in fact, it looked strained over its bones. Imagine seeing something like this. Your first thought is that those bedtime stories you used to hear are real, and then you start to question whether or not you were drugged somewhere along the way. I had no idea what I was looking at, but I knew I was in trouble. The creature had the appearance of coyote and man, but with no tail. I could feel myself going ghost white. When I noticed the creature beginning to turn its head, I quickly ducked behind the wall. Then I heard the creepiest thing of my life. Coming from the exact same position that creature was standing, I heard a girl's voice. Mommy, I'm sorry. I darn near soiled myself when I heard it. It kept apologizing over and over, mumbling the words, but slowly increasing in volume. I'm sorry. I sat at the right of the window as I now heard scratching on the glass. The creature was growling as it spoke like a human girl. I closed my eyes tight as I thought to myself, if you're real, God, I need you more than ever. I hadn't spoken that out loud. You're scared, it said to me. So it did know I was there, and it somehow knew what I was thinking, or perhaps it just knew that I was terrified. I mean, it knew that I was hiding after all. Every inch of me was trembling. My eyes shot open, and I made a run for the car. I got there and locked the door behind me immediately. All the while, that thing was screaming again. I peeled off down the driveway, managing to get on the highway as fast as I possibly could. When I got off the highway, I must have been doing 80 still down residential streets. I'm sorry, but I'd never been more scared or disturbed. I cried to myself the entire way home. That night has left me scarred. I still have nightmares about that thing's voice. I see its vile face looking at me in my head. It's this fear and paranoia that drove me to actually submitting my story here, because I began to look for similar sightings of things like that in Texas. Hoping I wasn't alone, hoping that I'm not insane. I've lived here all my life, and I never thought that these legends were more than just legends until now. I wish I had someone to help me with this because going through it alone is hell. My boyfriend and I love to try new things all the time. One thing we hadn't done yet was camping. Though I wasn't a huge fan of the idea, I agreed to go. We live in a pretty preppy and basic town, so nothing out of the ordinary ever happens. We also don't live by any kind of dense forest, so that meant we had to travel a bit to find a good camping site. I was not in any way prepared for what was going to happen within the next day. We decided to leave the weekend after my 17th birthday as a little getaway gift. We stopped by the nearest store that sold camping supplies and stocked up on the basics. We had plenty of food and water for a night. The trip was about 2 hours from our hometown, and the drive was quite straightforward. The park we were staying at was in a very desolate area, which creeped me out the second we arrived. We parked at the entrance of the trail, unpacked my car, and headed into the woods to find a spot to settle down in. After about 15 minutes, we came across a small clearing, just big enough to fit our tent and other supplies. As we've never touched a tent before in our lives, it took us a little too long to figure it out. Getting it to successfully stand up was irritating, but we did it in the end. But by the time we were done, the sun was beginning to set. We threw open some chairs, started a quick fire, and relaxed for the night. I kept my back facing the tent, as I was extremely uncomfortable with my back being exposed to the dense forest surrounding us. About an hour or so passed, and it was around 10 p.m. The only light we had at the time was the faint moonlight and our slowly dying fire. Almost the entire time that we'd been there, I would keep hearing movement right outside the campsite where the light didn't reach. To keep myself calm, I just told myself it was rabbits or deer. Soon we decided to turn in for the night, tired from the trip and our struggles to set up camp. We climbed into the tent and settled into the warm blankets, quickly falling asleep. I woke up at an unknown time later to near complete darkness. As I was about to close my eyes again and go back to sleep, I paused for a moment, listening to the woods around us. There was nothing but silence. The only thing I could hear was the ringing of my ears, desperately searching for some kind of sound to sense. I found this unnerving. I never imagined then that the woods could go quiet like that. I mean, there were millions of insects out here, at least, along with a population of nocturnal animals. I lay there for a few minutes until I hear my boyfriend calling out to me from outside the tent. I'm about to get up and leave to check on him, assuming he needed me for something, when I feel him grab my arm just as I reach the zipper. I jumped and turned around to see him still laying there in the tent next to me. He looked at me, mortified, telling me that he heard that too, and that I needed to stay put. He grabbed his flashlight and left the tent on his own, looking around the campsite. At first I didn't want him to go out there, but I knew that he was fully capable of handling himself. As scared as I was, I probably would have gotten in the way. Being curious, though, I did poke my head through the mesh opening in the tent to see if I could see anything from inside. I scanned the tree line. I saw him with his back facing me. He seemed to be looking at something. Then I saw what it was, a deer looking right at him, almost barely behind a tree. As I looked at it more closely, it didn't take long to notice that there was something wrong with it. Its head was abnormally long, and it seemed to be a bit taller than the tallest deer I'd ever seen. It began to move behind a tree closer to my boyfriend, and just then, as it did that, I got a closer look. The thing appeared starved, and it was tall. It had to have stood around 7 feet. Its fur was matted in places with what looked to be dried blood. It had a curve in its back. It wasn't until I looked at its front legs that I realized it wasn't a curve in its back. It was a hunch, because it was standing up. It didn't have 4 legs, because the things in the front were arms. I froze, unable to move, unable to call out to my boyfriend. I watched in horror as it stared at him, and I prayed that he would run back to the tent. It drew closer and closer to him, until I was desperate. I panicked, unzipped the tent flap, and screamed at him. This broke him out of his trance, and he ran back inside the tent. At the same time, the creature jumps and runs off into the forest. I look to my boyfriend and tell him that we need to leave. For some reason, I'm whispering. He nodded. Without packing up our things, except for the most valuable stuff, we made a run for the car. Along the way, I pretended not to hear the rustling in the woods around us. By the time we got inside the car, my lungs were burning, and my legs felt like they were going to fall right off of me. We began to drive away, but as we took off down the trail away from the campsite, our little friend poked its upper body out from the bushes on the side of the road. In plain sight in our headlights, it stared at us as we drove away, but the two of us kept calm and pretended that it wasn't there. My boyfriend and I only rarely discuss this traumatizing event when we're alone. I really didn't think we would get home from this. I thought we were doomed out there. Who knows what that thing was? But considering just how many other sightings I've read online of things similar to it, I now know there are things in the woods of this world that we don't understand and probably never will. I just recently moved to Arizona. I've never once believed in something that couldn't be caught using modern technology. It was 2018, and I believed that if I wanted to find something, we would find it eventually. It was the eve of Christmas Eve 2018. My friends and I live in Payson, Arizona, and we'd gone out north of town about 5 or 6 miles onto a trail. It was a secluded area from the rest of the town. It was quite cold that night, so I was layered up pretty well. We were all set on building a bonfire and having a few drinks. I felt uneasy the whole drive up there. I'm a fan of nature. I've never been scared of the dark or being away from people. But that night made me feel very weird. It was eerie. I was setting up the fire, but the whole time I felt as if I was being watched. Granted, there were several of my friends around me, but that's not what I meant. I was being watched by something else. Something that wasn't supposed to be here from the distance. But first, let me take this back a couple of weeks. It was a day or two before Thanksgiving. We ventured out to the same area to have a bonfire and to drink. I didn't drink at all that night, so keep that in mind. I was curious to what the area around us was like, so while attaining firewood, I decided to go on a stroll past the bonfire, just to see what I was up against. Before I could even make it out of the area, I noticed something moving behind a tree. I asked if people were commonly up here, but no one answered me. They kept on drinking instead. My eyes would not leave that figure. It was standing behind a decent-sized tree. I could tell it was bobbing its head back and forth like a buoy in the water. I kept thinking, man, whoever this is, they've got some problems. I wanted to call out to them, but as soon as I opened my mouth, I found that I could not speak. I felt weird. Then whatever this was shot out from behind the tree running into the distance. It was so unnaturally fast, I immediately fell on my back. I started kicking away and backpedaling in the dirt, scraping and cutting my hand as I did it. Everyone around the fire noticed me fall and began to laugh at me and thought that I was drunk. I managed to get up and asked, "Did you guys see that?" They looked at me like I was dumb. For the rest of the night, I felt on edge, always staring near the fire. Now back to that night on December 23rd. Usually I don't drink. I'm not a fan of alcohol, but tonight I decided to let loose and drink a couple of rounds. Captain Morgan rum was my go-to. I was having a good time. We were all singing, just letting loose. What I experienced weeks before was not even on my mind anymore, and it was a good night. I got up to go take a leak, and I walked past the truck about 300 feet out near a big rock to urinate. I could hear everyone back at the fire talking and having a great time. I then heard my friend Corbin say my name. I was tipsy by then, I won't lie, but I wasn't drunk, that's for sure. "Hold on, man," I told him while I was still peeing, but he was persistent, telling me that I needed to see this immediately. I rolled my eyes, thinking it was weird how quick he was able to move around the rock without me seeing him. I zipped up and stumbled my way behind the rock where he was. Now when I tell you this, I mean it from the bottom of my heart. Whatever I saw was not my friend Corbin. It took my mind a second to figure out that it wasn't him. I'm glad I stopped and didn't continue to walk towards it. It was a clear night, full moon up above, and not a cloud in sight. Whatever I saw, The moonlight radiated it. It was on all fours, at first appearing like a dog, but I saw its eyes, and when I made eye contact with it, it stood up. Whatever it was had to have been at least 6.5 feet tall. I took a step back, and I saw its eyes clearly from the light of the moon. Tears formed in my eyes immediately. I definitely believe in God as a Christian myself. What I saw, I thought it was the devil himself. I backed away, but every time I took a step back, it took a step forward. I wanted to call out or scream or do something, but I was so terrified that I didn't want to be taken or killed right there, so I dropped to my knees and started to pray. Apparently it didn't like that, and it let out a sound which sounded like someone groaning very loudly in annoyance, but only if they had water in their lungs while they did it. At this point my eyes were closed, and I was sobbing uncontrollably, praying for God to save me. I heard it crunching foliage while it made its way back into the woods. Somehow, for some reason, it had spared me. So for what reason had it lured me behind the rock? I sat there crying. I got the courage to get up and run back to the fire. I fell about 20 feet by one of the trucks and started crawling instead. I began screaming. I must have looked hysterical. They were all over me, clearly worried now, but at the same time, they were still thinking I was drunk. I have never once hallucinated while drinking. I know what I saw. I was so scared. I was freaking out. I began to tell them what I saw. They started to put the fire out and gather their things. The whole time this was happening, everyone was scrambling to their vehicles. I never broke eye contact from where I saw it, because now I saw that it was back, standing by the rock, not even 20 yards from where everyone was at. I was to the point that everything seemed like a blur. I was so horrified. I could have sworn I saw the thing smiling at me. After that night, the friends that were there at that campfire, they were harassing me on Snapchat, calling me crazy and making fun of me. Everyone but 2 people treated me like this. But these 2 messaged me, telling me that they believed me and that they themselves saw something running in the trees after my first scream. I know I saw what I saw. My friend and I had a long day that day, filled to the brim with fun and adventure, enjoying the downtown portion of Charleston. The breeze was cool, and the rough waters rolling against the docks was relaxing. But we knew we needed to head back before nightfall. When we made it home back to our city of Somerville, our appetite for fun and excitement hadn't been sated yet. So we decided to drive around and look at a newer town nearby, a place called Summers Corner. It was a nice town, sure enough, but it often felt unreal. There was a heaviness to it, almost suffocating. But that didn't deter us that night. We were a pretty resilient bunch, always moving forward, keeping a smile on our faces, even when the circumstances become gray. About half an hour into the drive, we discovered a street called Navajo Boulevard, which had immediately interested us, as the name references the Native American tribe, a great culture and proud people. It's a culture I was quite familiar with. Their folklore and mythology was quite creepy at times. If you're using this website, then I'm sure you're familiar with the Yi-Nodluxi, a shape-shifting and vile creature. One that used to be, or perhaps still is, a man under the skin. Anyway, we were driving down the road, our windows rolled down so we could enjoy the cool southern breeze. It was a dark and starry night. While it was beautiful, that feeling of dread from earlier was thicker now, more palpable, and it nearly had a physical weight to it, like a heavy backpack full of textbooks kind of weight. Immediately, we felt watched, not by the wildlife, which we noticed was pretty quiet that night, but by something else, something that was watching us and didn't want us there at all. And even though we were driving, I had a feeling it was following close to us. I quickly noticed that I couldn't stop myself from glancing every which way, keeping a lookout for something that I wasn't even sure was there or not. We drove for several more minutes, when suddenly, from seemingly nowhere, there was no wind before, but we were hit by a heavy gust that slammed against the car. It was so strong that it nearly forced the entire car off the road and into the woods. Our hearts were pounding out of our chests from the shock of it. I had to slow down, nearly stop, to keep us from crashing or flipping. But then I slammed on the brakes, because the most bizarre and grotesque-looking thing I'd ever seen ran out in the middle of the road in front of our car. This creature was an amalgamation of malice and other spiteful things. Its eyes were pale and silver like the moon, and as the brakes squealed, it stared into my eyes, making my body go rigid. But unlike a natural animal, staring into the headlights of a car and petrified, this thing began to approach us, and every time it took a step, my legs would tense up and force my back further into the seat, even though there was no room left. Then it unhinged its jaw, its mouth growing to multiple times its original size, and let out a scream that sounded like it wasn't even coming from its mouth. This forced my mind back to reality. I released my foot from the brake, and I drove like a bat out of hell away from there, though driving past the thing, even at a fast speed, was terrifying. As we made our escape, the feeling was only intensifying, that feeling of fear and hatred, of oppression. Suddenly, my friend yelled at me to look out the window, right behind my seatbelt on the outside of the car. That thing was chasing us down, easily keeping up speed with this vehicle. It was so close I got a good look at its entirety. Its skin was pale red, and its eyes seemed to have no end to them. Its eyes were goat or reptilian-like, or maybe a combination of the two. There were horns on top of its head, giving it a demonic appearance. Just as a clawed hand scratched at the back glass window, we screamed and were able to steadily approach a speed that it could not replicate. Soon the creature gave up and disappeared into the darkness of the night. The breeze of our speeding car scattered the leaves across the road. We continued speeding away until we made it back home and we were locked safely inside to spend the remainder of the night wide-eyed and quiet. Native American folklore was an attempt by early people to explain the things they didn't understand, like every culture does, and these stories happen to be a great way to tell your kids not to be little brats. Basically, respect nature, or it's going to start chewing you up and spitting you out. And if you think that sounds like a good time, go get some help. Good night. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe to my channel, and we will see you in our next story.